Episode 1 of the SITREP, the Situation Report. You know, my normal podcast it's about giving you knowledge. It's about giving you knowledge on a variety of subjects. We always bring in someone interesting to interview. And I thought, why not also give you guys what you often say you want, which is a one-stop shop for some basic news updates, something you can trust. I get asked that question a lot. And I figured, why not? And why not give you some basic news of the day and also give you some insights into what we're working on in Congress. And I'll do it in a quick 10 to 20 minute segment that you can listen to on your way to work. So here's the SITREP, folks, our first episode. And of course, we'll have some help throughout some of these conversations. I'll have help from my staff on certain topics that they study really well, and they'll be able to chime in as necessary. So, news of the day. It is the 18th of December, and what's going on Capitol Hill? Well, you may have seen on the news already that the Ethics Committee actually released their report on Matt Gaetz. That surprised all of us. I wish I had some inside information for you onto why that decision was made today, of all things. Now, that report addresses allegations of sexual misconduct, drug use, misuse of state identification records, improper use of campaign funds, violation of House rules. Gaetz, of course, denies these. He also notes in his defense that the Justice Department has, under Biden even, has declined to prosecute him. So you take what you will. The report will be out there, and you can make your own decisions. As a reminder, Representative Gaetz recently resigned, and following his nomination as Attorney General by President Trump, and now he will be having his own show on One America News Network. We wish him well. Another one you might be interested in. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, loses an election. She was trying to run to be the ranking member on the committee, House Committee on Oversight and Accountability. That's a pretty interesting committee. It's where you get to yell at administration officials. So, and of course, Trump coming in, of course she wants to be the ranking member on that. It's where you go if you want to yell at the opposing party. It's interesting that she lost, though, considering her prominence among progressives. And, you know, the way this works is each party, the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, we have our own process on how we select chairmen and ranking members. A ranking member just means you're the highest ranking of the minority party. That's what that means. And the Democrats have a totally different way of doing things. They tend to defer a lot more to seniority. And the Republican side, it's a much more of a merit-based system. You give a presentation to the steering committee, which is made up of members from all different regions of the country, and they vote in there. And of course, there's politics involved, but it is much more of a merit-based system than the Democrats have. The Democrats will tell you that they're jealous of the way we do things. But you do not have to worry about AOC being the ranking member there. Let's talk about the CR. That means a continuing resolution. So this is a budget term. And a continuing resolution basically just means that we are continuing the budget that we have already appropriated because we are having trouble agreeing on a new budget. Now, in theory, according to the 1972 Budget Act, what we're supposed to do is pass 12 separate appropriations bills, and you do that on a certain timeline. You do it every fiscal year. Those appropriations bills only deal with maybe 30% of the budget, if that, because it's really more like 15%, because you're not gonna take too much away from defense spending or veterans benefits or veterans affairs, and it doesn't touch mandatory spending, which is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. So we have these big fights every year, and the truth of the matter is, they're over very little part of the budget, but we love to kill each other over it. And when we can't come to an agreement, which is pretty much all the time because we live in what's basically a 50-50 country, and until one party has full control of the House with a lot of extra wiggle room, which we don't, we have a very small margin of majority. And if you have 60 votes in the Senate and the White House, until that reality comes, you're always going to have an uncomfortable compromise with the other party. I hate to break it to everybody. That is how life works. That is the political reality we live in. You will often hear from other members who want to tell you about a different political reality where if we just yelled louder or fought harder, you could just get more stuff. That's a fiction novel. Sorry. And so what often happens is you got to pass a CR. They don't have to like the CR. I'm not even sure I like the CR. As I'm recording this, I'm recorded as undecided as in the whip count because we're trying to figure out how much good and how much bad is in it. That's just how we assess these things. Now, if you take down this CR, if it doesn't go through, well, you shut down the government. Our military stops getting paid. It'll end up costing us more money in the long run, and there's no indication that you're going to get a better deal later on. So those are the realities of it. Farmers like this one because we're saving them. And I hate to break it to everybody, but you need food. And it should not be lost on anyone that we don't want to be in a situation in America where we have to import all of our food. Our farmers are at a disadvantage oftentimes dealing with, very cheap labor in other countries. And so they need a farm bill that we generally pass every 5 years. This has things like crop insurance in it, which helps farmers survive droughts and global commodity prices that fall too far down. We have a lot of our environmental standards in America that other countries don't have. All of these things are big costs on our farmers. So this bill helps that a lot. There's also a lot of disaster relief, especially for states like North Carolina and Florida that recently suffered extreme weather events. And so there's another one, PBM reform. I don't know if you've ever heard of PBMs, but pharmacy benefit managers. So these are like this is not something that most people know about in the healthcare industry. There were billions and billions of dollars, and there's a lot of bipartisan efforts to try and rein them in because we think they're making a lot of money on the backs of patients. And so that's in the CR too. PBM reform that would require price transparency. Though these are all good things. Bad things are, well, geez, we're just kicking the can down the road, and now Trump in his first 100 days, well, he's going to have to deal with this appropriations bill, the next appropriations bill for the next fiscal year, a debt ceiling, but also, Trump didn't weigh in on this, and that's so Republicans are left trying to figure this out. Elon Musk recently tweeted that everyone should be primaried and thrown out of Congress if they vote for a CR, and that we should shut the government down until Trump takes office. I'm not really sure he understands the implications of that. And so that's why this is a contentious vote. CRs are always a contentious vote because I think we've conditioned the American public to believe that there's some inherent evil in simply extending the budget a few months while we continue negotiations. And spending a quick minute on budget process, a lot of people get wrapped around the idea of passing 12 appropriations bills. Now it's happened maybe a handful of times since the Budget Act was passed in 1972. There is nothing in the Constitution, by the way, that says anything about 12 appropriations bills. This is a largely, in my opinion, it is a largely symbolic and arbitrary goal in budgeting, not written anywhere in the Constitution. It's written by some lawmakers from the early 70s. And man, what good came out of the 70s? Let's just be honest. But it's yet held as this sort of sacred cow that no one that we can never touch. And as objective thinkers, it's just something that we might want to think through. So the budget process will always be a contentious one, primarily because we make it that way and we like to rile our voters up. But when you come here to this podcast, you actually get some truth. Let's talk about geopolitics for a second. Russia withdraws air defense systems and other advanced weaponry from Syria to Libya. So that's a good geopolitical move for the U.S., where obviously you saw the fall of Assad recently, the huge surprise of the HTS, formerly known as Al-Qaeda, swiftly breaking through Syrian forces and taking Damascus really without many shots fired. Largely because Syria no longer has Hezbollah and Iranian proxies or Russia to help them the way they used to. Why? Russia's bogged down in Ukraine. Hezbollah was basically dismantled by Israel, and Iran is also on its heels. And so now you have a lot of unknowns going on in Syria, but this is generally just bad for Moscow. In other news, corruption may have disrupted Chinese military modernization goals, Pentagon report says. Well, that's good news for us. Of course, there's a ton of corruption in China's military and government in general. That's kind of what happens when you have a dictatorship. We saw that the same with Russia as well, as we were sort of surprised why they didn't have gas in their tanks. Well, it's because low-level military officers say that they filled up the gas tanks, but in reality sold it and made money themselves. This is what happens in a dictatorship when you have no press and no freedom of speech for anyone to call it out. So I've often said, by the way, that, China's a problem, a strategic adversary for sure, and they definitely want to be. That's their choice to be. But they're not 10 feet tall. I would still bet on America any day, and this is just one of many reasons for that. In other news, killing of a top Russian general is a message from Ukraine that you aren't safe even at home. So that was a bold move by Ukraine to assassinate Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov in Moscow. It's an escalation asymmetric warfare strategy. I'm not sure what you would do if your home was being invaded and raped and pillaged by an opposing force. I think you would do everything you could. Now, I wrote an op-ed recently addressing the idea that we're always entering World War III, and I would just point out that everyone who has claimed that we're entering World War III has been wrong every single day for the last 2.5 years. And they're wrong today, and they're going to be wrong tomorrow. There's still no World War III, and there's still no threat of nuclear weapons. That's just the reality. On that note, I think Trump is in an amazing position as he comes into office to potentially secure his campaign promise of getting Putin to the negotiation table. But that's only because of this escalation that has happened before. You cannot de-escalate a situation unless it's already escalated. That should be common sense. Trump will also be willing to take on much tougher sanctions as well, I think, in a way that the Biden administration has not. And so I think we have a lot to look forward to potentially if this is done correctly. In other news, U.S. weighs ban on Chinese-made routers in millions of American homes. You guys may have seen in the news recently an operation called Typhoon Salt. Typhoon Salt was reported to be a Chinese hacking operation into American telecom companies. They stole a lot of data, and they infiltrated into a lot of places, companies like AT&T, Verizon, et cetera. The Chinese are not good actors. They want to get into our infrastructure, and they want to be able to control it. And so it's no surprise that this is a concern of ours. Do not buy electronics made in China. They want to spy on you. This is why we voted to ban TikTok in Congress. Still waiting for some billionaire to actually buy it. And the second it's American owned, I'll be happy to get on it. DOE, Department of Energy, finally releases its long-awaited study on gas exports. Remember, they banned LNG exports, and of course, this resulted in a lot of frustration from oil and gas producers. Now, the Department of Energy's argument is that, if we're selling it abroad, then there's less to sell here, and it'll raise prices here. And then they did this study, and they said, hey, according to our own study, we're correct. Now, I think that leaves out a lot of other nuance to this. One, how much you're really raising prices domestically. But two, if you're not allowed to export, it means that your producers have no incentive to invest in more production and invest in and get those contracts for exports in general, export licenses and export facilities, which also causes supply to fall, which then causes prices to rise. I'm not sure that their analysis really takes that idea into account. I have a feeling it's probably quite biased. Nonetheless, President Trump is coming, and in all likelihood, he will simply reverse that. We want to be not just American energy independent. We want to be dominant in this space. And by the way, we have plenty of natural gas for hundreds of years to come. That being said, despite all of the energy that we have at our fingertips because of left-wing activists, we're still at risk of power shortfalls in the next decade. This is according to an article from Reuters, where the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, warns that nearly half of the U.S. faces an increased risk of power shortfalls in the next decade due to rising electricity demand from AI data centers, electrification efforts. So what does that mean, electrification efforts? That means green stuff. That means electrifying everything. They want to electrify cars, and push everything towards wind and solar, which, by the way, don't work all the time. That makes electrical grids very hard to manage. And you're doing all that without sufficient infrastructure expansion. Make it very hard to say, build more power lines. This is all a problem, and it's all a problem that's associated with radical left ideology of how power works, and it's a real problem. Last, let's talk about transgender skepticism from even the Washington Post. And finally, an article that argues that transgender activists no longer hold the moral high ground, as their advocacy for puberty blockers, hormones, and surgeries for minors has been linked to emotional extortion, claiming denial of these treatments leads to suicide, which is not true. Recent Supreme Court oral arguments and a Washington Post editorial expressed growing skepticism about the efficacy and safety of these treatments, citing studies that highlight potential harm and the need for more rigorous research. This increasing resistance marks a great shift, I added the word great, in public discourse, challenging the activist narrative and prioritizing the well-being of our kids. So that's good news too. That's all for today. Thanks for listening to episode 1. Give us 5 stars. Let us know if you like me doing this, and we'll keep at it.